Targeting civilians on a civilian train is an act of terrorism, and the Ukrainian regime know that, and moreover, their NATO masters know it. That means the governments in London, in Paris, in Berlin, and in Washington know that these acts are acts of terrorism. They are war crimes. They are crimes against humanity. The bombing of the nuclear strategic bombing Tu airplanes in the 5 targeted Russian air bases is not in itself terrorism until you look at the way in which these drones were delivered. There's a suspicion that some of them were launched from Finland and Norway, which, if true, will be of enormous magnitude, but most of them were launched from log cabins or the back of trucks that had been driven by people wearing civilian clothes across Russia in order to place them close to these strategic nuclear facilities. Now, wearing civilian clothes to commit acts of war is, of course, a war crime. It renders the belligerent stripped of the protections of the Geneva Convention. They can be executed if they are caught. But there's no doubt that it has provided a very useful war propaganda, armed war propaganda for the Ukrainian side, and their paid cohorts of NAFO fools and fellas are, of course, celebrating on social media. I thought I had gotten rid of all of them, but I've just had to block 20 or 30 more. But they'll be laughing on the other side of their face, or rather, the poor people of Ukraine, because the NAFO people are never in Ukraine. They don't even claim to be in Ukraine. They're just in the pay of those who are paying for the war in Ukraine. But the people in Ukraine are right now under incredible barrage of ballistic missiles, and maybe more to come. Maybe we'll get another viewing of the terrifying power of the Oroshenk missile, against which no defense in the world is yet available. The response to what happened today, when 4 nuclear bombers were set on fire, presumed destroyed, definitely an insurance write-off, is good propaganda, but of course it will change nothing in the course of the war. Russia has thousands of bombers, and it has thousands and thousands of very powerful weapons, including, of course, 1,500 operational nuclear missiles. It has battlefield nuclear weapons. It has the Oroshenk, and it has in total more than 4,500 nuclear bombs. I'm making these points not out of any love of war pornography, for I have none. That is not an affliction I have ever had. I've been in too many war zones for that. But to make the next point that I want to express, if anybody destroyed 4 United States Air Force nuclear bombers, what do you think would be the result? What do you think the United States would do to any country, any belligerent that broke the nuclear threshold, broached the inner sanctum of the nuclear doctrine of the United States of America? You just have to ask yourself that question, and you already know the answer. And the Ukraine will be getting that answer right now and in hours and days to come. Of that I have no doubt. But it undoubtedly will strengthen measurably those in the Kremlin who believe there's been far too much pussyfooting around in this war, and that it risks the loss of more life, not less. To wear kid gloves, to avoid taking out the leadership of Ukraine and taking out the essential infrastructure of Ukraine. I just give you this example. On the day when 4 attacks were made on 4 separate railway bridges in Russia. There are 17 bridges across the river Dnipro. Russia has not destroyed a single one of them, though they could destroy all 17 of them right now in the next 60 minutes. That they have not done so is a testament to either the strategic patience of Vladimir Putin or the naivety of Vladimir Putin, always hoping that by minimizing the impact of the war on essential infrastructure used by civilians as well as military, that Russia could take the moral high ground, Russia could be the good guy in this conflict. But if you're bringing down railway bridges on passengers and crew, the entire crew of the train in Bryansk were all wiped out. Every railway worker on the train was wiped out by the terrorist attack on the bridge. The fact that the other side is now abandoning all caution, is now firing Storm Shadow missiles supplied by France this day into Donetsk, a part of Novorossiya, a part of Russia. French missiles fired into it today, killing and maiming civilian people. The fact that the other side is infiltrating people dressed as civilians, as terrorist belligerents, to fire drones at your nuclear task force is, of course, a spear at the heart of the Russian Federation. It is actually, I hate to use the word because it has real implications. It is an existential threat to the Russian Federation because the Russian Federation's nuclear doctrine says that it is. Any attack on our strategic forces will be opening the attacker up to a strategic response. Any country with nuclear weapons has that in their nuclear doctrine. Because once the parity of nuclear force is broken on one side, the opportunity for others to existentially destroy that nuclear power is obviously there. So the impact on the talks tomorrow in Istanbul, you don't need to be Einstein to work them out. Here's my best guess. It is only a guess. It might be that Putin's strategic patience will endure, although I doubt it. But it could happen. But I suspect that the Russian negotiators who are already in Istanbul will table a simple demand of the Ukrainian armed forces through their representative in the talks for the complete withdrawal of all Ukrainian forces from all of the territories of Novorossiya, the immediate creation of a buffer zone around Ukraine between the borders of Russia and Ukraine must now be created, and Ukrainian neutrality and denazification be immediately proceeded with, followed, I'm sure, by the demand for the departure of Zelensky and the crew who launched these attacks today. Of course, at that point, the Ukrainian delegation will withdraw and they will seek further and better help from their NATO allies. Unlikely to be the United States, but definitely London and Paris. In London, the defense minister, an inky-fingered clerk with no discernible knowledge or background or experience in defense policy at all. A man, I'll remind you, called John Healey, because you've never heard of him before. A man who wouldn't be appointed to run the quartermaster store at a minor army base. He's your war leader. Look at him. Take a good look at him. Who knows? He might be the last face that you ever look upon. John Healey gave a speech. I think that's what they call them. I should say, rather, he read out a piece of paper at the Russie Royal United Services Institute in London today, in which he declared that Britain was preparing for war against Russia. And moreover, that we were going to build six new arms factories. I wonder how long they would survive any outbreak of hostility. You see, it's my melancholy duty to remind my fellow countrymen that the entirety of the British Isles, its entirety, every square mile of it, can be reduced to ashes, cinders, with everything that was alive in it then dead, by one Russian hypersonic nuclear missile with 8 warheads, splitting up, spreading across the country and destroying everything in their path. 6 arms factories. I wonder where they got the money for that, given that they cannot afford to pay our disabled people the benefits that Keir Starmer formerly described as being morally repugnant to cut them. He's cutting them. The cold weather payments to our pensioners that Starmer regularly accused his predecessor of preparing to scrap, he scrapped them. We have no money, but we give billions to Ukraine. We have no money, but we build 6 new arms factories. This madness of the British government is taking us all the way to Armageddon. Now, I know that Keir Starmer feels deeply about Ukraine. I'm probing it all the time. I'm probing his close relations with Ukraine and with Ukrainians all the time. But this is a backdoor way of taking us into Armageddon. Britain has made itself the number 1 enemy of the Russian Federation. There are many people in Moscow. I have no knowledge of it, but there are many people in Moscow who believe that the British state was involved in this terrorism in Ukraine today. If a shooting war breaks out between Russia and NATO, I warn my fellow countrymen of this: Britain is the number 1 target. If nothing else happens in that shooting war, there will be no British person left alive. There will be no 2 stones stood upon each other in any town or city in the United Kingdom. And then the radiation, which will roll out across the countryside. And then the nuclear winter, under which everything that is alive will perish. These are the stakes that we are currently playing for. Now, I don't expect that Russia will respond to today's attacks with a nuclear weapon, though they would be fully entitled to under their own nuclear doctrine and under the obvious realpolitik that any nuclear armed country would follow. If somebody attacks your nuclear weapons, you must respond with nuclear weapons, or your nuclear parity with your adversaries is over. But I do expect that the response will be, as I said, swift and terrible. We'll hear from Che Bose in Moscow in just a minute or two about what the atmosphere is like there. But I want to have some time to discuss something that has been troubling me over these last few days. Believe me, I never wanted to climb into this rabbit hole. It seemed to me that the madness that took place at the Victory Parade in Liverpool was just that, madness. First, like everyone else, I feared that it was a terrorist attack. I feared that the driver would be revealed as Muhammad this or Abdul that. I feared that he'd have a black face or a brown face. I don't hide from you that I was relieved when the police indicated in an unusual, unprecedented statement that the person arrested at the scene was white, was British, and was local. But the more I've looked at it, the more I realize that something is not right, and that there are important questions that still have not been answered. There's a picture of the driver of the car at the wheel. There's another picture released by the authorities of what they claim to be the same man, except it quite plainly is not the same man. And the court artists in Britain, you're not allowed to take pictures in court, but an artist can make a drawing. And the drawing looked nothing like the actual driver of the car, or the man we've just shown you, or the man who was actually at the wheel. But that's not the end of these strange events. Is his name Paul Doyle? Is his name Jean-Paul Doyle? Is he a former Royal Marine, Special Forces, British soldier? Or is he a former BlackRock employee? Blackwater, I beg your pardon, the former mercenary giant. Was he with Blackwater? Was he with the Royal Marines? Was he with both? These are questions that deserve an answer, because if it's one or the other or both, that gives a profile to the alleged would-be assassin that is intriguing indeed. But even that is not the only strange thing. Who were the snipers on the roof in Liverpool above the parade? Why were they not wearing uniforms of any kind? Why were they not wearing police uniforms? Why were they not wearing British Army uniforms? Why were, and Warren Thornton, an acquaintance of the show, a former sniper in the army himself, makes the point very powerfully that you can't have two snipers and no spotter. You can't have one sniper and no spotter. A spotter with binoculars is an essential accompaniment to a sniper. It should be two snipers, two spotters. But there are only two people on the roof, and both of them are looking through the sights of weapons. Who were they? And why were they there? Is it normal in Britain for a football victory parade to be overlooked by armed snipers without uniforms? And lastly, why did Grok try to tell us that that picture we've just shown you was in fact not in Liverpool, but in London, and years old from the siege of the Iranian embassy? Do they think Liverpool people don't know what Liverpool looks like? Do they think London people don't know what Lancaster Gate looks like? And when it was pointed out that the River Mersey was clearly visible in the pictures, Grok said, that's not the River Mersey, that is the Serpentine Lake in Hyde Park in London. Is Grok stupid? Or does it think we are stupid? I want to know more about what happened in Liverpool and why all these discrepancies have been allowed to spread like wildfire through social media, completely undermining the police's presumed initial intention of not allowing this particular act of lunacy to be as corrosive and dangerous as previous acts of lunacy in England have recently been. Che Bose is up next. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.